because we were hearing from returning citizens that years ago in Morca, when they come home and they go to the Morca office and they hand them a piece of paper and say, these are all the agencies that can help you, these are the organizations, good luck. That doesn't work for folks. Morca has transformed a lot since then. And I can't and won't see it move backwards. I also recognize that the likelihood of folks coming to this building or going to any other kind of general government office or deputy mayor for anything is not likely to happen. Morca needs its own office, needs its own team, because inside the government, just like outside the government, it's not going to be a priority for most people. We need the people for whom returning citizens are going to be a priority to be working on those issues. So we'll work with the Morca team, with the mayor, to make sure we straighten this out somehow in the budget. Zachary Rigoni, when I said your name, I knew I mispronounced it. I just didn't know how. So thank you for correcting me, and I apologize. You raised one question I actually wrote down because I need to answer myself, is outside of all the other changes, even if Morca remained in the same place but fell under another agency, how would we do oversight? And that's a question I need to understand as well, in addition to making sure we keep the agency, I think, the way that we see it today and continuing to improve. How do we do oversight if it's not an independent agency?
Well, I think that's part of why it's so important that it remains its own entity. Whether it is shifted, even if it's shifted under something, it needs to remain as its own dedicated office, not just having its duties absorbed. Because ultimately, if the duties are absorbed, when you're doing oversight of a given office, it's a lot harder to get details about the individual tasks that are going to be expended, because ultimately any given employee is going to have multiple tasks in that office. By having an actual dedicated office that allows you to look at it, I think, as has been talked about previously in the Morca oversight hearings, I think it's one of those, I mean, you're both big on data, being able to look and see specific information, hard data of what is being done is always important for oversight. But I think the more layers of bureaucracy you bury the duties under, the harder it is to get that data and to really zoom in on it. So I think that's why it's so important to have it as its own office, truly dedicated to returning citizens affairs, instead of part of a larger one where that's just one branch of a very large tree that is being done.
Yeah. Samuel Buggs, you're in Ward 1, right?
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Every time I drive by your building, I think about you.
I hope that's a good thing.
I hope so too. No, it is. It is. I've learned from you, and I appreciate it. Has Morca helped you or anybody you know navigate reentry?
Yeah, a few people I've talked to over the years that have said they've gained a great deal of help.
Good. Based on your experiences returning home and conversations with other folks you know, what do you think the impact would be on a returning citizen community if Morca did not exist as an independent or as an agency?
There'd be a lot of people in trouble. And simply put, and I think most people don't recognize this. Anybody that's been incarcerated do not want to be reincarcerated.
Yeah.
Those are most of us that do. There's situations and circumstances that are probably a bit overwhelming, and we subsequently fall back in the same old pattern. I know that has been my case until I got sick and tired of going through what I was going through. Yeah. But it's important because we all understand and know the importance of not only housing, but supportive housing. And Morca is a good place to receive the things that you need upon coming home.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Gabby Smith, we were together not too long ago.
Yes, we were.
I appreciate your work, and you've testified before about helping residents and returning citizens specifically get placed into full employment. And did you say without subsidy?
This one is without subsidy in the classroom.
Wow.
So the only thing we're allowed is smart chip cards and laptops.
Wow.
Yeah, but they're still showing up.
Yeah.
They're still showing up.
And those rates, 11 out of 13 job placements is significant for any cohort. Do you, one of the things you recommended at the end of your testimony is that we include a budget for direct support for community organizations. You mentioned, I think, that you get or have gotten funding from OJJ, I always forget that acronym, DP?
OSVJG.
There we go, that
Yeah.
one. Have you gotten support from MORCA in the past?
Yes,
Okay.
we have.
And-
We have gotten support. That's where we get our pipeline of participants. So we rely on MORCA heavily
Okay.
for our participants. And OSVJG has been really great in seeing or appreciating my explanation of the employment shifts. And so going into the unions is now a viable opportunity for returning citizens.
Yeah.
So they've allowed me to pivot and bring in math tutors to actually prepare them for the entrance exam to the apprenticeship programs.
That's great.
Yeah.
Which
The Carpenter Union?
I love it.
Yeah,
That's
I'm a
what I
part-
thought you were going to say.
Yes, I'm a
Yeah, they
partner
do a
with
great
the
job. I went to
Carpenter
one of their
Union.
graduations recently.
Yeah, we're working on a partnership where we're a direct pipeline to the union.
Great.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That is absolutely incredible. I don't think you'll need any help, but if you need any help, call on us.
Thank you.
So have you gotten financial support from MORCA or just participants?
No.
Okay.
But it would be great.
Based on your experience and what you do, what would direct support for community organizations look like?
Budgets for direct training programs, because there are other parameters involved with some of our grant funding. One of the programs that I just finished, you have to be a returning citizen in recovery as well. So if we take off the other elements of being eligible for being a participant and just deal with returning citizens, it would be really helpful.
Okay. Okay. So whether or not it probably wouldn't matter if the grant money lived in MORCA as long as it went to programs that specifically support returning citizens.
It would be easier if it was directly at MORCA,
Okay. Oh, why would it be easier there?
because we could just go right in, train their participants, and put them to work.
Mari, we need to work through this with you because, I mean, there's just, you know, somebody once told me a long time ago, nothing succeeds like success. When you see something working, like, keep feeding it, just like the Georgetown paralegal program. Success rates are not quite as good as yours, but still really high. And most folks, they come home, as Mr. Buck said, like when folks are locked up, they're not thinking like, I'm gonna come back here. They're planning their lives. And
They
so,
really are.
you know, but they need help often. So, okay, I continue to appreciate the work that you do. And want to make sure the city continues to support that.
Thank you.
Tracy Velasquez, anything I missed, because we've covered a lot of ground, and you mentioned a lot of this in your testimony, why it's important that it's a standalone agency, but any additional thoughts?
Well, DC's in a bit of a reentry crisis right now when it comes to people who have been in the Bureau of Prisons. It has been 5 years since Hope Village closed. We do not have a halfway house here in the district. We learned recently that the BOP has put the construction of a new halfway house back out to bid. And they have basically said, we're not satisfied with the progress that's been made.
Because they weren't making any progress.
Yes. And so right now, people are coming home from DC from Baltimore, from other halfway houses. And so MORCA is playing an especially important role right now in terms of, you know, helping meet the needs of people who have to go to a halfway house somewhere else, and they're trying to connect with housing, with jobs, with family here in the district. And that's, I would love to find a way to really look at this issue of this DC halfway house more closely, because it's really concerning to us, the deadlines that have been missed.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. And then I think the only other thing I would mention is, you know, we're concerned about the cuts to things like Medicaid. One of the populations that's going to take a big hit is single childless people. and they're going to have to navigate healthcare without Medicaid if the budget goes through as anticipated. So, MORCA could be a helpful, this would be many people who return from prisoner jail are single and childless. Some are, or at least they're not primary caregivers because of the situations they've been in, and making sure that they get health care. We know many people have mental health and substance use issues and have, lived through trauma and need behavioral health services. And so we are concerned about the impact of cuts in the health area on this population. And again, MORCA could be a source where people can figure out whatever it is that comes next if it's not Medicaid.
I will say you mentioned in your testimony some frustration or belief that MORCA hasn't met its full potential, and part of that, I mean, I agree, and I used to give MORCA a harder time at the hearings about this, but with the halfway house issue, I'd like to see MORCA out front with the coordinating with BOP. They are doing that work, but it's taking too long, and I'd like to see MORCA more vocal on those. The thing I recognize is that's over the MORCA director's head. That's a decision the mayor has to make, which is all the more reason I don't want this agency buried in the administration. I do think the administration supports returning citizens, but there's a limit on how vocal it's going to be, and there are some things that I need it to be more vocal on. And I think it's appropriate to criticize MORCA because that is the agency that is the front for returning citizens.
Right, and just to clarify, our comment then and comments now is really about the issue of resources. As other people testified, they don't have direct funds to support things like job training. They, in Prince George's County, their reentry office, I happen to know the director, he used to be my boss. They have the funds to work with employers more directly in terms of providing incentives to hire formerly incarcerated individuals. So, I would say that we should be thinking about how to expand MORCA's reach, and especially as it's a trusted organization, right? It's not buried in the mayor's office. It's not in the Department of Corrections. It's an independent place where people feel like they have comfort going there.
I appreciate that. I will. I'm glad you're here. My team and I will check in with the Prince George's County office, and we'll look at Baltimore as well. Want to see how, particularly Prince George's County, how their work in direct support is different than things like access to jobs. And then my guess is, in terms of the dollar amount, whatever they're doing in Prince George's County is probably not an overwhelming amount. But, and so even in tough budget times, it helps the city if we're getting people employed. So if we have folks like Gabby Smith who are really getting this population employed, and we can get more people employed and hold folks like Gabby accountable, say, look, we need you to keep up those numbers, but as long as you keep up those numbers, we have a pipeline. That's the type of thing I have to believe we can figure out. So I appreciate that direction, and we will follow up. If we have any trouble reaching them, we're going to call you for an introduction. Yes.
Just wanted to make one quick comment on the halfway house situation, because I was actually someone that was living in that Baltimore halfway house on my transition out, and MORCA was my lifeline. Having an actual case manager dedicated there, because the reality is in that halfway house, services related to DC are next to nothing. There's no real help for that. And if I didn't have that ability to get on the train, come down, talk to my case manager in MORCA, understand the notion of how to sign up for Medicaid, how to look at SNAP once I'm there, what programs are available, what things are there for housing, what steps do I need to take to get my license, it was everything I needed was at MORCA. And without that, I would have been thrown into the city at the end of the halfway house completely lost and unsure where to go. And the reality is that while maybe I could have navigated to find some other office that found it, the reality is that polls have shown that trust in government is lowest amongst marginalized groups, including returning citizens. Seeing that name, Returning Citizens Affairs, leads you to go to that office. Knowing they have case management for you helps to go. It's not going to be the same if it's just some faceless organization that's part of the government or part of the mayor's office that's there to help you. You're not going to have people riding the train 2 hours down from Baltimore to get this assistance that they really need to successfully get in. So my case manager was my lifeline.
I appreciate you saying that. And when I went to Baltimore not too long ago, we did hear from a number of folks that they are connected with Mork and getting services. So how do any of you have thoughts on how Mork is doing now in terms of coordinating with other agencies or programs?
I mean, I know that they participate with our Second Chance Hiring Alliance, and I'm happy to check back on that, but I do know that they participate with us in that venue, but we can certainly get some more information.
I know we deal with them largely through referral processes. We have a workforce program as well as a peer navigator program, and we get referrals from MORCA to those programs. We also try to keep on top of the various events they're doing for returning citizens, just to be able to be a part of those events and interact with the greater community, because that's how you start meeting other contacts and forming that network of support for things. I think it's one of those we've talked about in terms of making more with less money. I still do think really dedicating to that clearance house notion of this is an organization where everybody interacts with, even when they don't interact with each other. So using that as a means of putting together various community groups and organizations to kind of help facilitate things and deal with some of the duplicative effort that happens in this field, I still think is a way that the office could be doing more without necessarily needing more funding to be able to do it just with their current job. But the referrals are big, because it's one of those, the reality is MORCA is one of the first places any returning citizen goes into the city. And so their work with the various community organizations, beyond just a piece of paper, like you said before, but actually talking with people, finding out what their specific needs are and being able to funnel them to appropriate programs, I think is a massive part of the agency and what it does.
We are in our first budget deficit in a few decades in this city, and we are going to have to figure out, at least for a few years, how to do more with less, which makes me glad. I know my agencies hate it, but we've really focused on like key performance indicators and key goals for the past few years. But now we find ourselves where we really have got to like focus on a core mission and how do we measure progress. Lead up to say, I don't know where we're going to find $1 anywhere, but if you had $300,000 in a magic wand, what would you do at MORCA? Anybody?
I'd like to take that.
Please.
One of the things that we found recently in these recent cohorts that we just graduated is that there were viable jobs available for returning citizens, and there were several instances where they just weren't digitally prepared in digital literacy to take the jobs. Something as simple as a janitorial job, which is waiting for them, I had to help them do their onboarding paperwork because they just didn't know how to navigate a phone, a computer, a laptop. So if we could take $300,000 and figure out where each participant needs